welcome to Guys Dealings with Feelings, where we focus on men dealing with mental health issues and solutions. I've come a long way in my journey since losing my son, but there's still a lot more to learn. So I'm sharing all that I have learned and continue to learn. I'd like to ask a favor for anyone listening today to please like, share, subscribe, and follow wherever you're listening to us today. This really helps drive the message forward, and doing so could change someone else's life. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and our Guys Dealings with Feelings, and on YouTube and Instagram at ITU Thrive. That's the letter I, the number 2, the letter U, and the word thrive. So today I'm so happy and thankful to have Kevin Palmier on today. He is the CEO, founder, and host of The Next Level University, a global top 100 self-improvement podcast with more than 1,700 episodes, reaching over 1 million people in more than 170 countries. Kevin takes a no BS approach to holistic self-improvement. I'm excited to get to talk to you and pick your brain some today, man. I'm really happy to have you on.
I appreciate you having me on, Aaron. I appreciate the wonderful bio. And most of all, I appreciate what you're doing. I think this is a very unique show with a very unique message. And I am always very blessed when I have the opportunity to share on shows like this. So I very much appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much,
You're
man.
very welcome.
And I can see, I was saying before we hopped on, I'd like to be you when I grow up, because I reading through what you've been doing, man, and what you're focused on. I thank you as well. And I kind of fell into the whole holistic wellness thing. I was doing it and I did it, and I'm still continuing to try to grow more and more. But I didn't know what I was doing. So I began to learn, and I was like, oh, well, that's what I did. It wasn't very organized, that it could have been a lot more. So I'm interested in digging into how you learned and all that. We're going to start off with that when you were young, you were doing really good, but you still weren't in a good place. Can you tell us some of your story and what led you to helping others improve their lives?
Yeah. So for me, it's important just for context. I was raised by my mom and my grandmother. So I didn't know my dad. I didn't have any positive male role models around. And obviously that has played a role in not only who I am today, but the journey to me becoming who I am today. So I always like to throw that out there because I think it's very important. I was never someone who enjoyed learning. I was never someone who enjoyed education. So after high school, I decided not to go to college. I said, this is not for me. I don't want to do it. I ended up working a bunch of different odd jobs: gas station attendant, personal trainer, truck driver, forklift operator, cleaned hospital floors and bathrooms, many, many, many different things. Mm-hmm. But in my early 20s, I got a job in an industry called weatherization. And we would go into large buildings, usually state-owned buildings, and it was our job to retrofit the buildings to make them more energy efficient. So I essentially went from making $15 an hour as a construction laborer to $60 an hour at this new job. As someone who didn't grow up with any money, I was convinced that I just found the key to happiness. And if I just grind my face off, my life is going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing. I ended up getting into a relationship with someone. And if you looked from the outside in, you would assume I was living the dream. So when I was 25, I had just started prep for a bodybuilding show. So I was in the best shape of my life. My girlfriend was a model. I had a sports car. I had a high-paying job. I had a new apartment. I had all of the measures of success that you can imagine. But I was depressed. I was anxious. I was insecure. I was very low self-belief. I had very low self-worth. I was a shell of myself. I was a shell of the man that you would have thought I was. Girlfriend ends up leaving me because I wasn't a very productive, supportive partner. I wasn't terrible. It wasn't anything like that, but it was just, I was having enough trouble holding myself up, never mind helping somebody else with their going through their journey. Mm-hmm. So when she left, I committed even more to making a boatload of money. And the next year I made $100,000 and I didn't have a college degree. And here I am thinking, here we go. This is it. And I remember when I opened my final pay stub, I was expecting all these feelings and I didn't get any of them. Zero. In that moment, I realized that for most of my life, I had lived unconsciously. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. So in 2017, I started a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast. And that was, I just wanted to explore deep thoughts and I wanted to have cool conversations with cool people like you. And I hoped maybe somebody would find value in it. It was never, I never expected it to become what it has become. So very much like you fell into holistic self-improvement, I fell into podcasting, and then it became my mission to never have to get out of the pool. And then that was the journey, and that's how it all started.
First of all, I'm appreciative of your perspective and sharing that, because I think a lot of people, me included, I mean, I'm not, super financially successful. I'm definitely comfortable in my life. I know I'm going to eat and have shelter and all that. I have no worries on any of that, but I don't make a ton of money. So I know a lot of people, I don't anymore, but at one point they think money is the answer. And you realize that. How old were you when you realized all this?
27.
Okay, so that's pretty young. I say to make myself feel better. So that's huge, because you have to look in the mirror and figure some stuff out. And that was leading to my next question, which was, were you just miserable, or did you slowly realize you were depressed and dealing with anxiety? I know a lot of times, sometimes figuring that stuff out is like one of the hardest parts. Like, you think that we're in the rat race, we're in the hamster wheel, and we think we're doing it right. It just sucks. Well, everybody always said it sucked, so here I am, and we just keep living that way. So how'd you figure it out, man?
It actually happened before that. So my partner and I, before we moved to that new place, we lived together in just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And one day I was home from work, because we were in between contracts, and I was just hanging out playing video games, and I was home alone. And I had this moment, Aaron, when I was playing video games, I put the clicker down and I had a very real thought. I said, if this is what life is, just this gray existence, I don't know if I want to do it. I don't know if I want to be here anymore. I wasn't planning anything. I didn't have any plans, but it was just this realization that I didn't really long for this existence. My girlfriend got home that day, and I told her. I said, hey, I kind of had a weird moment today where I just didn't really want to be here anymore. And she said, well, Kev, I really think you should go to therapy. And I said, oh, no, not me. No, I'm going to be fine. Me, I don't need therapy. I'm tattooed bodybuilder. We're fine. We're going to be fine. And eventually I took that advice, and I went and I seeked out therapy. And when I went to therapy, there was a lot of stuff that was uncovered. They're not having a father in the situation, and certain things that have happened through my childhood, PTSD, and it makes sense you're depressed. It makes sense you're dealing with anxiety. I always tell the joke, and it's not funny, but a little comedy. Therapy worked so well, I stopped going.
Well,
and then it didn't work so well, I didn't need to continue going. It just felt like I was healed, quote unquote. So I knew I had depressive and anxious qualities. I just never expected them to get to the place where they got to. Because after I made the money and then I started the podcast, I fell in love with podcasting and I wanted to do it. And the thing that was so hard for me with my job is it required a ton of travel. So the year I made the most money, I spent 10 months living in hotels in other states every single week. After I made the money, I thought to myself, I don't want to do that again. I know money didn't fix the problems that I thought it was going to fix. I'm not going to do that again for another year. I don't have that in me. So I was homesick all the time. Every time I'd pack my suitcase, I would get this empty feeling in my stomach. It was just, I don't know if I can do this again. I'm not inspired. I'm not motivated by the money. So eventually it got to the point where I was sitting on the edge of a hotel bed 6 states away from where I lived, contemplating, really having the thought of, I honestly think everything would be better if I wasn't here. And then that was a really big shift for me. So the anxiety and depression was something that I was pretty aware of based on the fact that I was humble and courageous enough to listen to my partner who suggested going to therapy. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed learning about it. Maybe I'm weird in that. I'm very curious about myself. Self-awareness saved my life in many ways. So it was revealed to me through therapy, but I still did put one foot in front of the other to actually go.
Sure. It is a huge commitment. Something I like to talk about with the whole thing with this show is that guys in our society specifically, I've never lived anywhere else, and specifically I live in the South, but guys just aren't supposed to go to therapy. Guys aren't supposed to really talk about their feelings. They're not supposed to talk about their emotions. So yes, it was a huge thing. The second thing is it was huge that you listen to your partner. Again, in our society, a woman telling a man to go to therapy. You responded exactly how most people do, but most people stop right there. They stop with the laughter and silly you. You know what I mean? I don't need that.
Yeah.
I'd like to get into you going to therapy, and I've done a ton of couch time, 150 hours of couch time after losing my son, but you really do uncover a lot of things. But so how was your experience? Did you go back? I think that therapists definitely have their place. I think it's huge that you were with a therapist who had a quote unquote graduating type system. I use my therapist for accountability in the affirmation that it's okay to feel this way, and the education that goes with that, and what we've learned so far, which really isn't a ton as a human race on mental health specifically, but what we've learned so far about psychology. So could you give us a little insight into your experience with that, because it is really a thing. Like there are a lot of men who just haven't gone to therapy, and it's almost like the boogeyman. It's not, and they're not true, but nobody really talks about it. So how your experience went?
Yeah, of course. I had a moment where I was parallel parking in downtown Boston for the first time I ever went. And I was thinking to myself as I was walking up this spiral staircase in this old brownstone building, I'm going to cry. That was my biggest fear. I had two fears. One, I was going to be judged. Two, I was going to cry in front of a stranger that I had never met before. One of those two happened. I cried in front of a stranger that I had never met before. But there was no judgment. There was no shame. There was none of that. It was, let's uncover stuff. And the thing that I was so afraid to do, I'm not even kidding, Aaron, I was genuinely excited to go back after I left that first time. The only reason I stopped going is because work picked up and I started traveling a ton again. And the only time I was home was Saturday and Sunday, and that person didn't have any sessions. I went back to therapy after my partner left me with the same thoughts of, I need to understand, what role did I play in this? And this is always something I say, because I think as a man, I would have needed to hear this. Doing something that scares you does not make you weak. It makes you strong. Most people don't go to therapy because it scares them. External success and internal fulfillment are very, very different things. External success is consistency, discipline, work ethic, grit, awesome. And you might have that just in spades. The internal stuff is self-worth, it's boundaries, it's looking in the proverbial mirror. There's different layers of what scares us. I wish I heard that. I wish there was a man who said to me, Kev, I know you think you're tough, and I know you think you're brave. If you were really tough and you were really brave, you'd actually go inward and face some of the scariest stuff you could possibly face. I needed someone to tell me that. Because, yeah, it makes sense that people think it's weak. You're talking about your feelings. Talking about your feelings is one of the hardest things in the world. So if you're doing that, you're braver than anybody who's avoiding it. I became very positive towards therapies, to the point where I've uncovered a fear of mine, a deep fear, Aaron. I have a large fear of disappointing people. So before I came on here, I researched you, and I listened to a couple episodes, and I checked out everything you're doing, and I try to become very familiar with a person. One, I think it's respectful. Two, I consider myself a professional. Three, and maybe the biggest reason, I don't want to disappoint you. I don't want to get to the end of this episode and you say, Kev, I was really hoping we'd go here and you'd add value, but you didn't. I'm looking for a therapist as we speak, so I can go figure out, where does this come from, and how do I stop this from limiting the amount of impact I can have in the world and the success I can have in my business, and how is this affecting my relationship? I love the self-awareness because it's constructive. So that's my current relationship with therapy, I'd say.
Oh yeah, that's awesome, and that's exactly how I think we can utilize, take advantage of that resource that we have in therapists, and it's becoming more and more available with the online stuff. And I just in anybody listening, if you haven't done it for any reason, just try it out. And if you don't get it right the first time, it could just be that it's not a good match. It's not that therapy was a failure. It's that the match was a failure. And that's okay. It's nobody's fault. You just move on to the next thing. You mentioned something there, Kevin. I don't want to hop on it. It's consistency. And so a two-part question: why is consistency so important in our lives? And what are some tools that we can use to stay more consistent?
I always use the analogy of splits. So if Aaron said to me, Kev, I'll give you $1 million if you can do the splits by this time next year, what would the best way for me to get that $1 million be? To practice the splits every single day. Because if I only do it once a week, it's not going to happen. Twice a week, probably not going to happen, right? The closer to consistent I become, the more likely I will be successful. So it really is that from that perspective. But this is the other thing. We are already consistent human beings. Unfortunately, a lot of us are consistent towards the path of least resistance. So if you go through the drive-through every day and you're getting your coffee and your breakfast sandwich or whatever it is, that's a consistent behavior. Is it consistent in alignment with goals? That's a different conversation. So it's very, very hard to succeed without consistency. It's almost impossible because most people will do something 1 time or 5 times or 10 times or 15 times, and you don't see results from anything in that amount of time. I'm currently dieting. We're doing a 10-pound and 10-week weight loss challenge for our podcast. In the first week, I gain weight. So if I wasn't consistent with the process, I would be convinced that I couldn't possibly lose weight. When in reality, I just haven't been consistent enough over a long enough period of time. The thing that works really well for me is public accountability. We said on the podcast early on when we committed to this, we're going to do an episode every day for the rest of time. We'll never miss. It won't happen. I promise that to the audience. I have a ton of public accountability. Something that works really well that I've used a lot with clients and we've used in the business is a commitment device. So I was being kind of lazy for a time and I wasn't going to the gym as much as I wanted to. And I'm very motivated by money still. It doesn't run me, and I know it's not going to fix the internal stuff, but I like money. So I went to my wife and I handed her $100 bill and I said, I need you to do me a favor. And she said, yeah, sure. What do you got? And I said, if I don't go to the gym for the next 7 days in a row, I need you to take this $100 bill and I need you to rip it up in front of me. And she said, there's no way I'm going to do that. Understandable. But I said, babe, it's done. The fact that I gave you the $100 bill and asked you to do this, it's already done in my brain because I'm not going to watch you do that. So all a commitment device is, I will do blank or I will do something more painful if I don't do it. If a good way to do it is I will do this thing or I will donate to a cause that I am extremely against. That's a really good way to do it. What we'll do with clients at times is, and again, this is where their understanding and their approval.
Sure.
I'm going to charge you for 2 coaching calls. If you don't do what you say you're going to do, that other coaching call disappears and the money goes away. And people never miss when you do that. So I think it's really about finding what motivates you as much, if not more, than the accomplishment of the goal, and then leveraging that against you. There's a reason that when we're backed into a corner, we do stuff differently. We do things we normally wouldn't do. I'm not saying to do it that way, but yeah, usually there's not enough skin in the game. Or a big one that I've seen is people just don't believe it'll be worth it. Why would I go to the gym every day? Why would I go to therapy? Why would I consistently have check-ins with my partner? I don't think it's going to be worth it. So we have to check in with why don't you think it's worth it and what would make it worth it. Those are a couple simple ways to be more consistent.
I love all that. And, where I am in my journey, I have seen some successes. I stumbled so if I just give you a little background, the first 7 years, man, I did tons and tons of shoulder up. So lots of, EMDR, I did TMS, did couch therapy, took medications. I did all of those things. Then for the last 4.5 years, I've really been doing the holistic, which the head up part is needed, but I've been doing the physical part. So exercising, I don't go to I don't really like weight rooms, but I exercise at home with weights. And then I do lots of cardio, whether it's pickleball, walking, things like that. I've seen that there are results, but then you still have that temptation of least resistance. Like it's constantly there. And it's almost instinctive maybe that we default to that. Is that right? Is it an uphill battle? Is it just is it just inside of us that's saying, hey, I want to, and I don't want to say lazy, maybe unguided, because you're right. We stay committed to a lifestyle, whether that's go to work and come home and get everything done and come home so I can sit on the couch and drink a beer, or whatever, come home and work a second, third, fourth job, whatever it is, we do stay committed. But like you said, a lot of times it's unguided, or it's just on the path of least resistance. So what's driving us to that least resistant path?
I think it's just human nature.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just human nature. And I think a lot of it is the lack of admittance of the pain that you'll feel if you don't accomplish the goal. Mm-hmm. I think that's a big piece of it. Is it's really hard to feel the pain in advance. And that's what I'm always trying to do. I have a very honest conversation with myself, and maybe I'm weird for this, I don't know. I will talk to myself and say, Kev, either you do what it takes to accomplish the goal, or you don't get to complain when you don't accomplish it. Very simple. Hyper logical, but very, very, very simple. I'm a bodybuilder. Nobody cares whether I cheat on my diet. Nobody cares. Nobody will know. I'll know. I'll know, and then I won't accomplish whatever the goal is. And then I'll say to myself, was that 5 minutes of pleasure really worth the next 5 months of regret? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, then that's a different story. Mm-hmm. That's a completely different story. Sure. So, yeah, I think it's human nature to choose the path of least resistance, because we're optimizing for survival, not thriving. It's just stay alive till tomorrow and then do the same thing again. Right. What I've learned is when I'm on a streak and I've exercised for X amount of days in a row or whatever it is, it's harder to break the streak. There's this weird thing where when you do something 14 days in a row, you don't really want to break it on the 15th. And that's something to leverage, but it all depends, it all depends on the person. Sure. Oh, and what am I going to stop 1,700 episodes in? Just going to stop now? I can't stop. There's too much. There's too much momentum. It's part of my identity. That's another reason consistency is so important, because it becomes part of your identity. And when you lock in, I am the type of person that blanks, you can see how that can be. I am the kind of person that stops and gets a beer on the way home. That's a different identity than I am the type of person who gets up at 6 a.m. and goes to the gym, hypothetically. So that's another reason why consistency is so important, because you will identify with the behaviors that you most consistently practice.
I love that. I love all that. You and I align on pretty much everything. I was raised by a female, and you mentioned that being raised by females, and I found that key, Kevin, because it's helped me. I don't know if it's kind of given me an inside look of how emotions are shared, and I didn't have the dad there to, shut up and move on with it type mentality, brush it. Maybe that has helped us in communicating some of these things. I know that post-traumatic positive is a real thing. I didn't realize it was a real thing, and it doesn't necessarily set in as quick as PTSD. It's kind of when PTSD begins to fade that the positive will begin to come up. And I believe we make that happen. And so many people have pushed through their hard times to become the best version of themselves. Can someone really succeed without struggle? And more importantly, can't we use life curveballs, tragedies, etc., as the foundation for what will become the best version of ourselves?
I think a lot of people want to convince you that struggle is a state of mind. And I just am not at a transcendent enough place to believe that. Maybe I will be one day. I don't know. I think you will struggle in direct correlation to the size of your goals. I do believe that. Aaron, if you want to get to 200 podcast episodes, you will struggle less than I to get to 2,000. It is a law of nature. Resistance creates strength, and the size of the mountain dictates the amount of resistance. So I think it is necessary, and I think it is beneficial as long as it is in constructive amounts. Some of us will struggle more than others just by default because of the way we're set up, the way where we were born, who we were born to, the situation we were born into. Circumstance plays a bigger role than I think a lot of people are willing to admit. And then from life's curveballs, 1,000% you can use them as opportunity. Something we've said very often is your adversity can be your advantage. I'm not saying it will be, because for every adversity that's turned into an advantage, there's probably an adversity that's turned into a disadvantage or an addiction or a behavior or whatever it is. But yeah, I'm of a firm belief that life is most likely, it's going to be challenging. But I think there's also people on the other side that are convinced that life won't be challenging. Are they better off? I don't know. Is that serving them more? I don't know. I'd rather expect a storm and be prepared for it than be surprised by the storm and not be prepared for it. And I've had a lot of stuff in life happen. So I think part of it's based on the experience. But just even if you don't expect it, I think it's important not to run from it. That's the simplest thing. It's even if you don't expect it, prepare for the rainy weather, because if it does come, you'll be grateful you were prepared for it. But I think you're going to struggle, and I think you're going to suffer, and I think you're going to have to sacrifice to the level that you aspire to. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I love that answer, and I like the part where you say your struggle will be, it will match the loftiness of the goal. However big the goal is will be the big of the struggle. And I love that, because that's so true. If we set really low goals, we won't struggle as much until the end. And that leads me back to something you pointed out. And a light bulb went off. We don't get the immediate satisfaction of success. So when we're working back to consistency, we're working towards what we see as successful us. And we don't get that immediate, but we're like, I'm just going to stay with this path of least resistance, because we don't see the pain immediately.
Yeah.
And I love that you're introducing the pain a little clearer to yourself. You're not actually going through the pain yet. You're just making it clear to yourself, look, we understand the pain is a result of the lack of doing what we were saying. And so I wanted to circle back to that, because a lot of us don't succeed because of that. And it's getting worse probably by the minute in our society with all the social media and the immediate gratifications we are receiving. And it's all kind of falling in place. I'm thinking out loud right now, but it's all kind of falling in place where we're getting worse and worse, needing immediate satisfaction. And, we also live in a society where I believe we kick the can down the road quite a bit. And so we do that until we get to this place where we're laying on a deathbed or in a hospital room, or, we're going into a surgery or whatever, we've gotten a disease, whatever it is. And at that point, the light bulb comes on. I'm hopeful and encouraging, something when Joel passed, not only the humility that came with it, but the fact that life is so short. I mean, we don't know how quick it could be over. And that mortality is, I think, what people, if they could just get a taste of mortality, where they could be like, hold on a second, why am I screwing this whole thing up? Back to some other things you talked about earlier in your life where things were gray and they need to be, why is life like this? I don't want it to be like this. And we don't have to necessarily venture down the suicide route, but it happens, because it's like, if this is forever, this sucks. And so I encourage people, if you have this sucks, before it gets to any type of suicide, you really check on yourself and look in the mirror and talk to people that you love, like Kevin did with his girlfriend, and people that you trust that'll kind of give you a no bullshit assessment, like, bro, you drink too much, or bro, you don't deal with yourself, or bro, you're constantly trying to please everybody else, but you never take care of yourself. I mean, all these things others will see in us. And so ask and be open to their response and not closed off to it. So that moves me on a mindset. And, being open. You are open to your girlfriend. You're constantly open to yourself and becoming a better you. These are crucial. And our mindset is so important to our growth. And I believe that confidence goes along with that. So how can people work on their mindset and be more confident in themselves and their future?
One of the best books I've ever read is Mindset by Carol Dweck. And it talks all about the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. And ultimately, the simplest form is, a fixed mindset is you determine that you are the way you are forever, and there's nothing you can do to change yourself. And a growth mindset is someone who understands that you are hyper malleable, and you can't change everything about yourself, but there is a lot that you can change in terms of the way you see the world, the way you see yourself, all of that stuff. So I would check in with that first. And are you the type of person who thinks that you are who you are forever and there's nothing you can do about it? That was me in the beginning, 1,000%. I literally asked my business partner when he recommended me a book. I said, what is the point? Like, why should I read the book? That was where I was. I didn't understand that you could grow and evolve and you could become more confident. So that has helped me tremendously. And I just want to connect that to what you were saying before, Aaron. I think one of the reasons that it's very hard for many people to take external feedback is because they've never given themselves internal feedback. They haven't given it to themselves first. And a growth mindset is required to do that, because there's a big difference between saying, I suck and I'm going to be that way forever, and right now I'm not doing the best I could, but I know if I do this, 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 and this, I can really work on these things. So I think a lot of it genuinely stems from a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. How can someone be and show more confidence for the future? This is the hard thing. The only way to really build confidence is to do things that you're not confident you can do yet, but you have to do them in the right micro doses. So we have something that I really experienced in the beginning. We call it the confidence conundrum. You want to do something. You don't have enough confidence to do the thing. You don't take the action. You don't get any feedback. And that locks in to you and your identity that you can't do it in the first place. If we have someone in our life who can inject a little belief, at least you take the action. And then you get results that you never would have gotten. Oftentimes it goes better than you expect. You get feedback, and then that becomes your new, hopefully, potential habit loop. So the simplest thing I can say is, the thing that's helped me the most, is identifying what my fears are, and then figuring out, okay, what is something I can do to get on the other side of this fear? I know it probably sounds overly simplistic. It's just exposure therapy. It's just exposure therapy. When you put a horse next to a street, maybe a highway, they freak out because they don't like that. But if you do it for long enough, it becomes normal and they don't freak out anymore. Humans are very similar, where we decide at some point in our life, I am afraid of blank, and then blank is now off limits. It's like a part of a map in a video game you haven't unlocked yet. It's just not even a possibility. But when you poke your head over the fence and say, it's not too scary over there, let me take a look, that now becomes an opportunity. So the simplest form is something we call fear chasing. You have to do stuff that scares you every single day, not 10 out of 10 fear, where you're going to have anxiety attacks and panic attacks. I've been there. I went too far. But maybe a 2 out of 10 fear, where you know it's handleable, you know it's controllable, and you know it's not going to kill you. I think that's really the best place to start. And it helps if you have someone in your corner who's willing to do it with you. That was a very important key for me. My business partner has been helping me with this since day one. So it's helpful to have someone who isn't afraid of the same stuff you're afraid of to kind of go experience it with you.
Sure. And I'm glad you qualified that there. Because of the topic of my show, there's some heavy fears that people have. And so I'm very glad you qualified that. I have fears of failure and not being enough and not being good enough and sticking. And I think that lends to the willpower, which Huberman talked about on one of his podcasts sometime. I think he was talking to David Goggins. We have a willpower like cortex. And the more willpower we put out, the bigger it grows. And when something stops to be a challenge, so I hate to go to the gym, so I'm building willpower, but then I go to the gym and I love it all of a sudden because I've become addicted to it and the growth, then it starts to shrink back down because it's no longer taking willpower because now I enjoy it. So pushing ourselves makes it easier to push ourselves, but it's so hard to push ourselves when we're stuck down like that, man. So this is one I wanted to preface a little bit before I ask the actual question. We're going to talk about purpose, and it's something I'm careful with for this simple reason. And it's where our purpose comes from. I'm big on finding or learning what our purpose is versus I was assigned a purpose. And so I need to become that. And personally, I'm agnostic, I'm not religious, but I know at one point in my life I was, in that, and it could be that I'm totally wrong. There is a deity and this individual has put a purpose on us and we grow into that assignment. I'm okay with that. I understand that. And if that's how people view it, that's fine. I don't want to lose them tripping over that. But I fear that when we feel like we had this purpose, so I was born to be a doctor and I just didn't live up to it. I screwed up. I lived my life and here I am at 46 and I'm not a doctor. And so it's already sucks that I didn't live up to my own expectations to become a doctor. But now if I feel like I've let some divine thing down of that. So and it's kind of, it can almost lend itself to proving that I'm a failure. So I've been big on that, but I do know that we have to find our purpose. We have to be purpose driven, or we can't hardly compete, because if I'm up against somebody who's purpose driven and I'm just, say, money driven,
Yep.
I'm going to lose like 99, if not 100 out of 100 times, because that individual is fighting for something far greater than the financial gain in it. They have a purpose for it. So with all that being said, how do you suggest or teach others how to find their purpose?
Yeah, this is always a very challenging question, because much like you said, it stems from many different places. One of my mentors said that your purpose comes from your deepest pain. And that always resonated with me. That always resonated with me, because I don't think I was put here with a purpose. I think my purpose was revealed through pain. And I think for most people, it is. I do. I think most people experience something and say, wow, I really hope that never happens to anybody else. And then that becomes their mission. So what I would say is there's a bunch of different questions to ask, like what really, really, really pisses you off. My business partner and I were in the airport one time, and we were getting ready to go to Florida or something for, I don't know, speaking. And there was this couple. I don't want to assume they were married, but it was a man and a woman, and there was like 4 kids. And it was probably like a 9 a.m. flight. And the man was hammered. And he was literally dragging one of the kids across the floor. And Alan and I were like tearing up. And it makes me emotional talking about that, because that pisses me off to no end, because it's just irresponsible. And that's the wound of me, of not having a dad and really wishing I had a positive male role model. That pisses me off. Is it any coincidence that I'm trying to be the best possible man I can be? I want to be better behind the scenes than anybody ever knows. If anybody thinks I'm any reasonable human in front of the scenes, awesome. What I am to my wife and my team and people who don't see me on camera, that matters more to me than anything else. I want to be a good, character-driven human. I think that comes from growing up without a dad. I think that comes from having toxic people in my life. So my belief is, if you ask yourself what really pisses you off, that's a great question. What would I find you talking about on a random Friday night to people? What are you excited about that you're surprised nobody else is? That's another great. I love self-improvement. I love it. Nobody else cares as much as I do. I love it. All right. That's a big piece of it. And this is where I would kind of do a remix. Aaron, I think most people have a pretty decent view on what their purpose is supposed to be. I don't think they know what the vehicle is. Most people I've talked to, their purpose is to help a certain type of person or a certain thing accomplish a certain goal in a certain way. But then when you say, oh, that's amazing, awesome, I'm so glad you found that, that's amazing, that must make you feel so good, awesome, how are you going to do it? That's when they say, I don't know. I mean, I could never make any money doing that, or I could never start a YouTube channel or a podcast doing that. I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, because then it goes from heart of this is what I believe I should be doing to head of how do I deploy this in the world. And I think purpose is heart. And I think strategy is head. So I would say that if you never had to worry about money and you were forced to do something for the betterment of humanity, not sit on the beach and drink margaritas all day, because that's not going to be a fulfilling life. It might be a fulfilling week, but those hangovers are going to be real after day 8. So it had to be in the betterment of humanity. What would you do? And sit with that and make a list of 10 things. Because when you don't need the money, it's easier to see the vehicle. I've always wanted to help people. I've always loved helping people. I used to do baseball camps when I was the captain of my team. I loved it. I enjoyed that. I was coaching people on Snapchat long before I was a self-improvement podcaster. I love helping people. I never had the vehicle. That's why I fell in love with podcasting. I found my vehicle. The purpose is the same. It's just more specific. So I would take a look at it from that approach, because I think a lot of people want to help a certain type of person accomplish something in a certain way. It's just the how that we get stuck with.
They've already niched down. They just can't figure out the vehicle. And I think that goes back to what we talked about a second ago with confidence, and having the confidence, the belief, the understanding that if you go after that, and it goes back to what I was saying, if you are purpose driven, you are going to outperform your competition. Yep. There's just no way around it. And getting people to figure that out and to make big shifts in their lives and to go against what's been ingrained in us since we were children, because this philosophy has been at it for a while in our country. And so it's really hard. Like, this is beliefs that go back, core beliefs that go back 2, 3, 4 generations. Yeah. And so it's really, really tough to get onto it. So I'm empathetic to people having to deal with it, but we must understand that these changes have to be taking place. And that leads to accountability and looking in the mirror, and how important that is for all of us. So why do you feel like self-awareness is so important?
Self-awareness is kind of everything. Because if you don't know who you are and you don't know why you react in certain situations, you can't really control it. There's a lot of us that know more about a sports team than we know about ourselves, and that's dangerous. I love mixed martial arts. I watch every UFC every single time it's on. I never miss. But if I know more about that than I know about what triggers me, what excites me, my strengths, my weaknesses, my traumas, I'm in trouble. I am in trouble. If you don't know why your car doesn't start, you don't have awareness of why it doesn't start, you're kind of out of control. And I think the same about us as humans, except we're way more complicated than vehicles, because there's so much going on. So yeah, it's that. Self-awareness is important because you are literally the vessel that you are going to live out your entire life in. And if you don't know what the controls do, it's going to be really hard to imagine, strategize, design, and then accomplish the things that you want. That self-awareness has been everything for me. I want to know why. I don't necessarily want to know. I mean, obviously I want to know how, but I want to know why I think the way I think. Why do I think the way I think? Because if I can understand that, I can change the way I think. But if I don't know the why, it's kind of just guesswork.
Love that. And I'm going to officially take over if you know more about the gambling or fantasy part of football, baseball, whatever your sport is, or if you've spent more time on that than you have on yourself in the last year, then some reflection is definitely needed. Because that is so, I think, A, true, how many people have done that, and how many of us have done that, and B, how, if we say it out loud like that, it's absolutely batshit crazy. And I love football. We graduated from the University of Alabama. We got the Titans here in Tennessee. We hadn't been too good in the last 20 years, but we love our football in the South, and we spend so much time and energy and effort and money, and you can keep saying stuff.
Yeah. And
then, well, how much time have you done on reflecting or digging into who you are and what really makes you happy? I will get laughed at for asking the question. And it's like, man, that needs a total flip on its head in our society. Like, you should laugh at somebody who does that, not somebody who's asking that question. And that's how we look at it. And I think
the population's just smaller on this side. That's why it's how many people have so I'm in New England. Most people hate the Patriots because of Tom Brady and all that.
Yeah, I don't really for a long time.
Yeah. I don't follow football a ton, but there's a lot of people you drive down the street, they have Patriots flags. Like, yeah, okay. I understand you love football. Awesome. I'm passionate about stuff too. If you're not passionate about your own self-improvement, the team's going to continue to grow while you don't. And that's the hard thing, Aaron, is if you're looking in the mirror, it kind of looks like you're losing because you're admitting, I need to work on this, and I think I could probably work on this. But in the long game, you're winning. But that's the hard thing, is you look like you're losing most of the time. There's people, so I'm 34. There's people that have like a big house and they have a couple nice cars and they go on vacation a couple times a year and it looks like they're winning. And here I am, a business owner who reinvests all my money back into the business. And at times it looks like I'm losing. But in 10 years, it's going to look different because our growth trajectory is increasing and theirs is flatlining. I'm at a very unique age where all the people who party and it looks like they're living the dream, they're starting to decrease and we're still increasing. And it becomes polar opposite. So yeah, your growth is one of the most important things in the world. It just doesn't seem like it because it's not sexy. Most people don't talk about it. And it kind of sucks to do. Watching football is a lot better than reading a book. It is.
Absolutely.
Right? But one is going to give you better results than the other.
Absolutely. One's going to give you results and the other isn't.
That's true, yeah.
One's going to pass 3.5 hours by and
right.
the other's going to give you some results. It's huge, man. And I appreciate that explanation. So
of course.
Finally, I'd like to get to, I'll be sharing the link to, it's a group coaching program, I believe, that you hold quarterly. In the description of this episode, I'll put a link. But if you could please tell us more about that program and anything else that you'd like to share with the listeners.
Yeah. So we have a group coaching program that runs every 90 days. And we take 10 people. So it's different than other group coaching programs because for us, it wasn't how do we make 10 times the amount of money with 1 hour of our time. It was, I know a lot of people have never had a coach, especially in the self-improvement space. So let's create something that has a lower barrier to entry that isn't as intimidating maybe. And you're doing it with other people. So there's built-in accountability. And it's a little bit easier when you're on a team. It's not all about you. So we do calls every other week for 3 months. And we're focused on relationships. We're focused on finances. We're focused on holistic self-improvement. And every single call is catered to one of those specifics. And then everybody's in a WhatsApp group where you check in with Alan, my business partner, myself, and our assistant coach, Amy. And the ultimate goal is for you to have the most consistent 90 days of your life and then continue those consistent habits after you're done. I don't want you to have to continue doing group coaching. I want you to take the wheels and drive off. So that is our group coaching in a nutshell.
Outstanding. I love it. I love the purpose of it. I love how you're doing it. And
I appreciate it.
I'm sure appreciative of everything that you shared with us today. There's some real gems in here. There's some really good stuff that was said. There's tools that people can totally implement today in their lives. Everybody has heard an individual who has taken, it's so obvious. Like when your child dies, like somebody says, I lost a child, immediately you're like, shit, you feel bad for them. It's sad. Mm-hmm. And I get it. It is really sad. And I still, if I go too far into it, I will become emotional about it. I don't live there, but it's so obvious that I suffered a traumatic event. It's so obvious that I needed things that I had to work on. You were in a position where you were making $100,000 a year, but you found that you weren't where you wanted to be. Now, I get that you found it in a dark place in your history, but it turned into the brightest light in your life. And I'm just so hopeful that others can hear that and know, because it's not always so obvious as losing a child or in an accident, or your brother died, or you're sexually assaulted. It's not always that obvious. And when it's not, and it's just kind of like there's a cloud hanging over your head all the time, you don't realize, well, man, I'm not like Aaron. I mean, my kid didn't die. Why do I feel so shitty? Well, maybe it's like Kevin in that you just realize that this isn't how you want to live your life. And it doesn't matter how you got there. Obviously, there's got to be exploration. You've got to go back through and dig through all that. Kevin's done a ton of work. I've done a ton of work. But it's so rewarding when you get to the outcome. And so hopefully, when hearing this today, you'll have found value and you can get some encouragement to make some changes. Just make some change, take some action. If it's a therapist, if it's a diet, if it's exercise, if it's mindfulness practices like meditation and breath work, we just encourage you to do that. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on, man.
My pleasure, Aaron. You're wonderful. I love you. I love what you're doing. And I'm grateful that we had to have a truly, deeply meaningful conversation.
Oh, me too, brother. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.